In late March 2026, the 4 Artemis II astronauts arrived at the Kennedy Space Center, standing shoulder to shoulder in front of the Orion capsule. Outside, the public excitement is palpable. The towering rockets lining the visitor complex frame a massive celebration of a new lunar mission. But behind closed doors, the engineers are dealing with sudden, critical physical snags deep within the launch systems. Former NASA astronaut Scott Altman points out the immense unseen pressures of simply getting a modern crew to the launch pad. Moving millions of pounds of explosive thrust off the ground safely requires perfect mechanical execution, and right now, the hardware is fighting back. We have a crew standing by, flight suits tailored, cameras flashing, yet NASA acknowledges 3 distinct roadblocks keeping humans from actually touching the lunar surface today. Arriving at the Space Center makes for great television. But until those underlying flight systems clear their engineering hurdles, the launch pad is just a very expensive waiting room. If NASA successfully conquered the moon in the 1960s, why is the math so brutally difficult for us today? The Apollo missions had a highly specific mandate: get there first. It was a geopolitical sprint that prioritized speed and temporary achievement over long-term viability. Artemis operates under a completely different directive, known as sustainable architecture. The goal is to build a permanent, repeating supply chain between Earth and the Moon. This diagram compares the 2 models. Left, the light payload of a single Apollo trip. Right, the massive cargo of an Artemis supply chain. Adding heavy life support for a permanent outpost causes necessary launch thrust to spike, pushing the absolute limits of chemical rockets. Modern spaceflight requires an entirely new engineering approach, where temporary survival is unacceptable and permanent sustainability is the baseline. That strict baseline introduces the second roadblock: risk tolerance. The threshold for crew safety today requires testing that far exceeds the aggressive gambles NASA took 50 years ago. Right now, the Orion capsule is the primary bottleneck where these extreme safety tests execute. Engineers are packing Orion with dense life support failsafes. These systems must be capable of operating completely autonomously, keeping the crew alive even if all communication with Earth cuts out. Every pound of added safety gear directly challenges the physical thrust limitations of the Space Launch System, the massive primary rocket carrying it into orbit. Which leads to the third snag. Integrating Orion's complex modern software with the SLS rocket's raw propulsion systems is incredibly delicate. They must communicate perfectly to prevent a catastrophic failure during stage separation, the high-speed moments when spent rocket boosters detach in flight. These delays are the strict cost of a space agency refusing to gamble with human lives. While NASA works through these internal bottlenecks, a geopolitical pressure cooker is forming globally. China's own lunar program is advancing rapidly, with heavy rockets already standing on the launch pad. If Chinese astronauts successfully establish a permanent presence on the moon before the US resolves its hardware snags, they will dictate the strategic rules of the lunar surface. This map of the inner solar system shows why the moon is so highly contested. A flight path from Earth to a lunar orbital station serves as the only viable launching point for a Mars trajectory. Because of this timeline dependency, any delay in the lunar supply chain cascades outward. If we fail to clear these immediate snags, the closing orbital window for a Mars landing gets pushed back by decades. The 4 astronauts waving to the cameras in Florida represent the fragile starting gun for human survival off-world. The countdown is already running.